First, welcome to Samui Real Critical Thinkers Community, session 159. So quick, unexpected. Thank you very much. Second, we started this group on the 25th of March in 2021 in the midst of COVID. So a lot of people who had sort of like doubts about what was happening, whether it was legitimate, what was happening around the world. People had suspicions, so a group of us gathered together. So we got together and we started a small group with only 9 people, and that 9 people grew into a grand total of 645 people as at. So what happens is most of the people who are on podcasts are not actually used to speaking to an actual crowd. A crowd of people sitting in front of them. They're used to looking at screens. They may have 1 to 10 people on their screen, but generally they stream and they speak into a screen that is streamed out, and maybe millions of people, hundreds of thousands or thousands of people will watch that. The difference is the speakers that we have zoomed in from overseas, when they actually have a camera that shows everybody in one room, it totally changes the dynamics of the meeting. And so what happens is they actually feel much closer to the group, and they get excited. They get excited because they know there are a lot of people who are awake, and they know that there are a lot of people who are waking up, but they just don't know how many. And what surprises many of the speakers that appear in our Samui Real talks is that they're actually very surprised to see just how many people will come together on a small island like Koh Samui. And then it makes them start thinking, well, actually, how many of us are there in my country? And this is something that they never really get to experience until they see a room full of people all peering at them while they talk. So it's quite special. You know, we took it for granted, but now we've come to realize after 3.5 years that it is a bit unusual. Just to give you a bit of history and background. I just want to make a special mention. Although our group is called Samui Real, there are people in the bunker that are from other groups that have their own podcasts, that they might be writers for certain different publications like Strategic Culture. We have all kinds of different people in the room. I just want to give a special thanks to Awakening Health and to Dennis O'Connor here, because he's taken the time to actually film all of this and to actually edit it and to post it, where I have been lacking in doing that, although I have been pushed by many people. So thank you. And I just want to say thank you to Tom and others for pushing me to actually try and get the information out of my computer. Still unsuccessful, but that will change. Okay, so let me introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is Tones. A big hand for Tones. Okay, and the title of his talk today is Consciousness, Solar Superstorms, and Imminent Disaster, My Theory of Everything. And as always, in good old Samui Real fashion, Tones is going to blow us away with that uplifting message of hope at the end of this wonderful talk about catastrophes. I'm joking. Okay, so Tones became a truth teller when he followed the evidence and rejected the climate science narrative. That was the beginning for him. After discovering much grander deceptions in human history, science, technology, and society, he developed a new cosmology theory based on cataclysmic solar cycles. So today is going to be very interesting. Again, put your hands together for Tones. And the Q&A will follow later. So please, during the talk, no questions. No, I have a question. Questions will come after the talk. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you all for coming. I've been a member here for a bit over 2 years, so I think I know many of you. Many of you know me, and you may regret it, but here we are. So this talk, Consciousness, Solar Superstorms, and Imminent Disaster, this is basically my opinions, my analysis. You wouldn't have heard most of these concepts ever before, so I don't expect you to be convinced by anything.
Let me just drop it and then don't touch it. Just try there. Just talk.
I don't expect you to change your worldview, but you can consider the concepts we're going to tackle here. I'm not providing references and sources. This is just a very fast bullet point presentation of broad themes and conclusions, because otherwise it'll take hours to go through all this. So actually, let's talk about a summary first of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to discuss what is happening, why it is happening, what will happen, and then what you can do. So, and it's going to focus on my original analysis, and the text in yellow are my original thoughts. Now, I gave a talk in May 2022 here on my 2062 theory. Some of you, I don't think many of you were here for that. Even if you were, you probably didn't understand it because it's very complex. So I am going to touch on that. This is a follow-on to that talk. And I finished that talk saying we can expect a lot more electrical activity from the sun, and you can expect more auroras and volcanoes and earthquakes. Unfortunately, that prediction came quicker and faster and bigger than I anticipated. We've had enormous solar activity in the last couple of years, and I've had to amend my theories. Not the 2062 theory, that still exists in my mind, and no one else's mind. But it's what's going to happen before then from what is happening right now that I want to put out into the public. At that talk, I offered $10,000 for any scientific evidence for man-made global warming or Earth curvature. No one took me up on that, so I've upped it to $100,000 if anyone wants to take me up on that. Hopefully you'll come out of today thinking I'm a genius and prophetic, or I'm an idiot, but you've had a good laugh. Either way, it's hopefully entertaining, because my ultimate theory is what we're going through should be entertaining. It should be fun for everyone to watch and not be in fear. Pat says my 2062 theory is about the end of the world, which it kind of is. But if you understand the broader concepts, you can sit back, take an aerial view, and enjoy the show we're in for. This is the most exciting time in human history to be living, and it's playing out in front of us. So I think it's very exciting and very fun. And if you know what's coming, it's even better. So, what is happening with consciousness? I think we're going through a 21st century perpetual worldwide delusion. And there you see the delusion scale, getting close to 100. And it's really started to accelerate in the 21st century. And I've got some dates there which highlight the progress of our worldwide delusion. So let me explain what I think is going on with our consciousness. So the preconditions for this delusion are disconnection, meaninglessness, free-floating anxiety, and it's manifesting as a social phenomenon in collective distress, fear, and anxiety. So many of these terms come from mass formation or mass psychosis, and I've termed a new worldwide delusion term for this. So these delusions and false beliefs and irrationality are worldwide and perpetual. And an individual's delusional reality can't be persuaded based on facts, and they are never resolved. And it's a worldwide phenomenon. So in the past, you're probably familiar with a mass psychosis, such as Germany in the 1930s, but it was local. It was a uniform psychosis among the population, and it was directed towards an individual or controlled by an individual. What I'm saying, it's worldwide, not local. It's not uniform, because various populations and individuals have differing forms of delusion, and there is no obvious leader in most circumstances. So here are these events which have controlled most of the population, for or against. And what they have in common is the media have declared self-declared a biased narrative and censorship necessary because there is an existential threat. So they justify false reporting. 9/11 and the wars that followed, well, the obvious 9/11 brainwashing was most people believed the towers fell down because either planes hit them or bombs brought them down. So obviously neither of those happened, so this is what I call the delusion. Now in brackets, so this is a bit of a fun topic for me in 2002, I call the end of new creative art genres, as symbolised in music by Fatboy Slim and the Gorillaz. After this, we saw no major art forms in either music, film, comedy, art. I call it the end of a creative explosion, and I put the year at 2002. So all these events are 21st century. 2007, the climate delusion began, where most people believe that, well, some people believe the world is going to end from climate change, and many young people are not having children or don't have a future, and they're committing suicide because of the climate. But most people believe that there is climate change and the carbon dioxide is pollution. It's called climate pollution. So this is by far close to 90% of the population are under some form of delusion. When if you actually read the science, which maybe 1 or 2% of the population has done, it very much states that the hypothesis for climate change has been falsified in their own words. Because temperature increases do not match half the rate that the models predicted, and there is no trend in worldwide extreme weather events. That's what's in the official IPC science of the climate alarmists. But of course, no one reads it. 2015, coincidentally, was the start of the Flat Earth movement, or the modern Flat Earth movement. I'm not including this in the delusion, but it's notable that this was also one of the social media topics which were censored along with 9/11 and climate change. 2016, Trump hysteria. I think we're all pretty familiar with this, and it's ongoing and getting worse. But it's a good example of where the hysteria can be also for and against. So there are delusions going on all levels. 2020, the whole world goes into lockdown, an obvious hysterical event and a delusion, where most, over 90%, were fully in favour of a 2-week lockdown. In conjunction with all these events, there's a social attack on reality with all these, I won't go list all those, but so, okay, so basically all these events are creating fear and trauma, anxiety, which if you're familiar with the term, is a form of mind control. Now I consider, also in conjunction, there are many hoaxes. Originally hypersonic missiles and quantum computers, but many others have written about the hoaxes of CERN and weather modification, chemtrails, HAARP, etc., space and satellites, ICBMs of course, UFOs, lasers, asteroids and the globe. If you haven't worked it out yet, I'm a flat earther. So I think everything that's going on is the greatest entertainment ever. This is a fantastic show on all levels. If you understand the lies and the deception and the techniques, it is hysterical. If you don't, unfortunately, if you just take what we're given at face value, it can be frightening and unsettling even if you don't believe it. So the most powerful thing to have is knowledge to understand where the lies are coming from, because you see them play out in front of you. And climate's the most obvious one because it's very easy to read the science, read a couple of chapters. So you know on a daily basis the lies that are being told because it's coming out of their mouths, and it prepares you for future lies. So when COVID happens, you see it a mile away. With the conscious, not louder? Okay. I believe the collective unconscious is working with consciousness. So the unconscious mind, or shared mental concepts, was popularised by Jung. Now I think it includes all these phenomena can be explained by the collective unconscious. I believe that all these phenomena tap into the collective unconscious. And that's how we experience a lot of what's going on. And you can experience this under stress or drugs or under a revelation. But what I'm saying uniquely, that part of this collective unconscious is a collective memory of a 12,000-year world disaster cycle. So the subconscious knows the disasters we've been through. We're not conscious of them, but the subconscious is. Because what happened 12,000 years ago, solar plasma formed these objects in the sky and they've been replicated in the lab. And the first drawings and paintings and rock art were these stick men. And they were put there as a reminder, as a warning for future generations. If you ever see these again, disaster is coming, because this is what they saw in the sky before the final solar plasma created a cataclysm. So this is why ancients believed the gods were in the sky. They gave these forms a human and animal forms, right? Because they thought this was a god that came to destroy and create life on earth. That's why gods come from the sky. We give them human forms. This is a squatter man. That's another solar plasma object seen in the sky. Some prehistoric communities put bird heads on them, but they were trying to interpret what they saw in the sky and thought it must be God because they're all powerful. So in the collective unconscious, there is a foreboding sense of imminent disaster, of existential threats we hear are all about us. Why are we? There is a higher frequency where everything is now presented as an existential threat, a threat to humanity. Doomsday bunkers are being built, there's doomsday economies. There's a plethora of 21st century end-of-world prophecies. Biblical prophecies, Kali Yugas, Isaac Newton predicted 2060 plus was going to be the end of the world. So many ancients have had the memory and prediction of disaster. However, what all of these don't have is a mechanism to explain why they will happen in the future and can calibrate them with events to confirm that date. So here we see some people say the March 2025 is the Kali Yuga cycle ending and a global cataclysm. Doomsday movements are gripping the Middle East. The Pentagon wants to build doomsday machines. Doom is everywhere. Okay, we're going to return to the consciousness later, look at why all this is happening. Now we're going to move to solar flares and solar storms. So this is meant to represent the sun. You're probably familiar with the sunspot cycle, which is an 11-year sunspot cycle. Solar flares are shot out from the sun. And a very big solar flare creates a CME, which you don't want to hit Earth, because here's what happens when a coronal mass ejection is a very large solar flare measured on the X scale. So CME is a superheated plasma ejected from the sun, and the Earth's geomagnetic field protects us from these CMEs. It creates auroras, such as the northern lights in the northern hemisphere, ocean turbulence, and in very big CMEs induce current in everything that conducts electricity. So the last major CME to hit Earth was the 1859 Carrington Event. It was an X80 in solar flare size. In America and Europe, it destroyed telegraph wires and equipment, created turbulent seas, and created very low latitude auroras. So that's how devastating it was. If a Carrington event hit Earth today, it would wipe out all electrical generation. And it would take years to rebuild that because you wouldn't even have electricity for factories to rebuild generating equipment. So we're talking at a major disaster if a Carrington event were to strike now. And mainstream science is a Carrington event is due anyway. So that 1859 event triggered the magnetic pole excursion and a weakening of the geomagnetic field. What happened in 2003, we had an X15 solar flare, level 5 solar storm. In 2012, when the Mayans predicted the end of the world with a major solar cataclysm, NASA claimed that the largest CME in 100 years missed Earth. So maybe we were lucky, maybe NASA is lying, maybe the Mayans got it wrong, or maybe they're humans today that translate what the Mayans thought was happening, got the translation wrong. I think the Mayans were right in the theory, but the interpretation of when that date would occur is 50 years out. I think it's 2062. So what happened in 2023, last year? The auroral record was shattered in terms of low latitude auroras. So you only see auroras in very low latitudes when there is a major electromagnetic event. It happened for the Carrington event. You might see them in low latitudes on average 1 or 2 per decade. Last year, there were 5 in 1 year. But the solar activity, not because of very high solar activity. So what's going on here? So that's what we see in the sky when you see an aurora. You're probably familiar with it. Now what happened in May of this year? We had an X3 solar flare, a disturbance of 412, slightly higher than the one in 2003, which was an X15 solar flare. So there wasn't much electrical disruption, but there were record-breaking aurora displays in May of this year. And geomagnetic storms are rated from 1 to 5, 5 being the worst. NASA predicted, or NOAA predicted a G4, and we got a G5. So they were 25% out in terms of predicting, after they've seen the solar flares, how big a storm will there be in the world. And we go 2024, it's in record-breaking auroras, the most in 500 years. And here we can compare solar storms. So what happened in May? Slightly higher disturbance index, but 1/5 of the size of the solar flare. So 2024 was an X3, 20 years ago was an X15, 1/5 of the size, Yet the auroras were seen in all over the world. Not just Puerto Rico, and Mid-Africa and New Caledonia. They weren't even seen in New Caledonia at the Carrington Event. So we're seeing aurora events like we've never seen before for relatively minor solar flares. What's happening with the geomagnetic field? In the year 2000, NASA said it's weakened by 10%. 2010, it's lost 15%. So in 10 years, it lost 5%. 2014, the electromagnetic field is weakening 10 times faster. The European Space Agency Swarm mission, which is supposedly the satellites which are measuring the field, said it's actually weakening at 5% per decade or 10 times faster than thought. Why? One likely reason is that the Earth's magnetic poles are getting ready to flip, says Rune Flobbergangen, whatever it is, from the USA. Now, what do you think a major scientist from a big institution, what happens to him when he starts talking about magnetic pole flips and the geomagnetic field is weakening 10 times faster than thought? He thought he was a scientist who should present the scientist. He broke protocol. He got fired for this, never to be heard from again, and this data is now being concealed. And if you understand climate science, the same sort of data manipulation is going on, where people in the field say it's no longer reliable. But we know it's still happening, because just this year, one of the a major astrophysicist says last year there was a major acceleration in the geomagnetic anomaly. So the field is weakening even faster than it was in 2010. My calculations don't take this into consideration. What's happening with the magnetic pole shift? After the Carrington event, it took a dramatic change. It changed direction and started moving really fast, from 15 kilometres per year to 35 kilometres a year and 55 kilometres a year. It's racing. So triggered by the Carrington event and 21st century going crazy. These excursions happen every 12,000 years. And here's an example of increased electrical activity in the Earth. This is not lightning hitting a volcano. This is an upward discharge from a volcano. This is the electrical circuit of the Earth is releasing lightning out of it. Volcanoes are electric. Some people view the Earth as a capacitor. So here's my little summary of what's happening in the world. From 1859, launched these movements of pole speed and the geomagnetic field. But in the 21st century, we see the acceleration in world delusion and the magnetic field and the pole speed. Why is it happening? Consciousness or world delusion. So, there is a connection with the geomagnetic field strength does affect memory, fear and cognition. This only comes from a single mice study, but they found that mice, when put into a decreased geomagnetic field, became disorientated, confused, couldn't remember which way to get to a maze, were very anxious, and they got quite dumb. So, if it happens in mice, it may explain what's happening with humans. And the collective unconscious directs the conscious. So, biologically, our bodies are aware that the geomagnetic field is decreasing. Subconsciously, we're aware of it. And I believe this is triggering the subconscious memory of disasters. The last time the body felt this, disaster hit 12,000 years ago. So I believe these are the forces that are contributing to the sense of foreboding that we're experiencing, because these are the subconscious triggers very powerful archetypes, and they resonate into the conscious world. Now, I'm not going to suggest that this world delusion is just from the geomagnetic field or the subconscious. There's obviously lots going on with the chemicals and drugs and water supply, which is affecting heaps of stuff. Radiation technology, we're all familiar with them. Of course, all this information we're also being bombarded with. One of my unique takes on this is that the 70s uniquely fostered fear and anxiety, firstly with environmental and nuclear scares, safety scares, crime and hygiene, hysteria. So these are basically ongoing fear campaigns, and they escalate into a predictive culture of parenting. No risk-taking, safety first, feelings first. I call this a 21st century comprehensive culture of emotional thinking. And what happens is once we divert into emotional thinking, we become vulnerable to all these other attacks of fear, brainwashing, propaganda, censorship, compliance, psyops and disinformation. So getting back to what I was saying before about why this creativity is diminished, creativity requires cognitive ability and lateral thinking. If we are denied these, it's very hard to be creative. Critical thinking and independent analysis is required to resist these phenomena. So my theory is all people are being attacked on multiple fronts. It's a circular amplification and feedback. I don't see it as hierarchical and pyramidal. I'm saying we're all being affected by this on all levels at all times. The mass psychosis of the German Nazis was local. People say it was short-lived. But we recruited Nazis to all intelligence agencies and to NASA. So maybe this is just a continuation of that era. They were the experts in mass mind control, deception and propaganda. And if you want to trace who is ultimately in control, intelligence agencies are behind most of it. All these phenomena are facilitated by emotional thinking, because emotional thinking makes you vulnerable to these techniques. William Casey, former head of the CIA, will know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. That's the objective of the CIA. How close do you think they are? Okay, super solar storms. I believe the Sun, Earth is an electromagnetic system. So rather than seeing it as a bright object, 90 million, that's totally separate from us and just gives us a bit of heat, I see the Sun and Earth as a complete system. The Sun creates the tides and gravity, the magnetic poles and the geomagnetic field. The sunspot cycle, which produces the solar flares, is an internal mechanism of the Sun. The CMEs are random and they cannot be predicted on the short-term scale. However, I believe there's a larger cycle of solar plasma disaster events which is controlled by the Great Year mechanism. So here's my model of the world, the flat Earth geomagnetic toroidal field. So we have a flat Earth, who knows what's underneath it. It's a field that engulfs it. North Pole's in the middle. The Sun, the Moon, and the planets revolve around it. Not my theory, but fact, the zodiac star system above us rotates 1 degree every 72 years. Conventional science says the reason for that is the Earth is a globe on its axis, tilts, and wobbles 1 degree every 72 years. If that were true, the seasons would start a day later about every 70 years. The season dates do not change. That is one of the many conclusive falsifications of the globe Earth theory. The seasons don't change. The zodiac star patterns just rotate above us every 25,920 years. The half cycle is 12,960 years, and I think that's the disaster cycle. 1/64th of that cycle is 203 years, which was the Carrington Event. So the Carrington Event was a solar event triggered by the Great Year mechanism. So in this theory, the sun is rotating daily above the Earth, and it causes the high tides and turbulent seas when the sun resets at the December solstice. You can go out to the beach, you'll see on a perfectly still day with weather, the seas are being churned up, and it's the highest tide because the sun is resetting at the December solstice. 2062 is the sun resetting on the Great Year cycle, and that's the disaster cycle. So the next solar plasma cataclysm is 2062, and I calibrate it with these real events in real time. I uniquely call the Bronze Age collapse in 1177 a solar event, and 1859 was a solar event. So this is the true life and death power of astrology. That's why astrology grips so many people. The zodiac age actually does determine life and death on Earth. So subconsciously, we know the zodiac is important for something. That's why many people have adopted it. So what's happening as the sun is now going to that final cycle to reset, the geomagnetic field strength is weakening, causes the magnetic poles to wander, and this weakens protection from the solar flares. So what's going on? Now, very small solar flares are having a dramatic impact. What will happen with our consciousness in world delusion? Well, unfortunately, my theory is the world delusion will continue and worsen. Why? Because the cognitive and psychological conditions which created this have not been rectified. It will only be tested by the next unknown event. I was calling it psychotic. I've got to be careful about using that word. So we don't really know, but I think we're still in it. An individual's awareness of a past brainwashing event is not an awakening, because the conditions which brought that person into that state of mind may have not been resolved. And in this disaster cycle, the consciousness of the next age of people, that's post-2062, will be determined by the consciousness of the survivors. So if you're lucky enough to be one of the survivors, those few people who survive will determine the age and the consciousness of the next era. Will we go into free energy, such as the pyramids use, or and Tesla, or will we go into combustion energy again? A further proof of this 12,000 year cycle, all present day Aboriginal Australian DNA originated from one tribe in northeastern Australia 12,000 years ago. Aboriginal culture goes back 40, 50,000 years. But most of them are wiped out. One tribe remained. Either they were lucky they were in a cave, or the solar storm didn't hit them. But that one tribe populated the entire continent, and it was the nature of those survivors which determined the Aboriginal culture for the next 12,000 years. European culture took a different path. What will happen with super solar storms? Well, I'm afraid a large CME Earth strike is inevitable and will be disastrous. With no electricity, society will collapse in days. When will it happen? Well, the greatest solar storms have occurred between 1 year before or 4 years after the solar maximum. In 2024, we had a solar flare of X3 this year and had 5 times the expected disturbance from 2003. Later in May, we had an X8 flare. NASA says it missed us. So this year, an X16 solar flare will be a Carrington event. It can happen at any time. It might happen next week, next month, next year. This is the unknown. I can't tell you when it's going to happen. I'll tell you when it's likely to happen. Next year is a solar maximum. So the danger period is between now and 2029. By 2030, a solar flare of X11 will be a Carrington event. On current projections, it may get worse. So solar maximum in 2036 means the danger period after 2030 will be 2035 to 2040. I think it's highly likely that by 2040 we'll have a Carrington event hit Earth. We'll only need an X8 flare. And in 2050 we'll only need an X5 flare. Just so you understand, the big cataclysm is an X1000 flare. That tells you how big the cataclysm is and why it destroys just about everything. Excellent book by Christopher Dunn explaining the Tesla connection with the Giza pyramids. Of course, they were energy generators, and they transmitted electricity wirelessly. So I'm speculating that in a wireless world, the pyramid builders were probably never warned before their cataclysm came, because they didn't have a wired system to destroy. So today, nowhere in the world that I'm aware of has any protection of infrastructure, of their electrical generating equipment, for either a geomagnetic disturbance or an EMP, a nuclear electromagnetic pulse. Why? This is a deliberate attempt to not protect the infrastructure with $1 trillion infrastructure programs, no plan to protect it. You will not get a realistic warning of the disaster. You may get a 1 or 2 day warning of a severe solar storm, but the impact and the destruction will not be given to you as a warning. It will be played down until it happens. Likely the destruction will not be uniformly worldwide. We're lucky here, the equatorial areas are safer, but it's unlikely. At the Carrington event, Australia was hit. The telegraph went out, but it wasn't destroyed. So it's possible some areas will not lose their electricity, and it's possible, and some areas won't be hit as badly as others. We're in a better place here. Expats and experts will minimise the threat of all solar impacts. Any existential threat that the sun poses, which this is obviously a real threat, takes away from climate change. That must be the number one threat, and you cannot introduce any other threat to that. So the magnetic field decrease you will not be made aware of, and the magnetic pole shift is not a threat officially. Experts will, however, fake asteroid threats and alien threats. And what NOAA are trying to do is change the scales which we measure solar flares to make it very hard to compare future solar flares to past ones. And they will say satellites get damaged and pretend they go up there and fix them, or that the solar wind moved the satellite and they put it back in position. It's ridiculous if you know what's going on. Such as these headlines: asteroid the size of 64 Canadian geese, asteroid the size of 350 giraffes. They're trying to let you know that this is all fabricated. But NASA has huge departments for asteroid threats and to put out these bogus press releases. And fortuitously, just today, we had low latitude auroras. This one was in Melbourne. What was observed, a 1.5 flare, a tiny solar flare, created auroras in Australia, in the southern states, and I can't read my laptop, and if I can read that, this is being played down as just 2024 was just a once in 20 year event, because it happened 20 years ago, and this was just another aurora. They're meant to happen once or twice a decade. They're happening continuously, and the truth will be denied you. So what can you do about these solar storms? Follow space weather news, so you know what's coming. You'll get one day's warning to activate a survival plan. You want to protect your equipment, you need air separation from the grid. You want to survive, you need power, water, food, ham radio, and decide whether you're going to secure your stuff or you're going to share it with the community. The elites have bunkers, so they've got it sorted. Now, I believe the vast European cave system was built in response to the solar cataclysm 12,000 years ago, or maybe they saw it coming. But if you're familiar with these, mostly in Turkey, this is trying to saying, let's not be on the surface if we want to. That's a major threat which was known about. What you can do. Now, I'm being a bit presumptuous here as if I know how to help people, but I think you first resolve your personal issues. You undergo, you correct former trauma in your life, forgive yourself, relive it the correct way to become enlightened on a personal level and then on a worldly level. So if you've been fooled by the world by some event, whether for instance COVID, that's okay, but you have to resolve the issues which made you believe it in the first place. Enlightenment is a state of fully understanding something. You've got to identify your emotional thinking as opposed to your logical thinking. I believe you should practice the scientific method. Have a hypothesis, an experiment, results, conclusion. If you do follow the evidence and change your thinking to evidence-based thinking, it makes decision-making very easy. Einstein said, no amount of experimentation ever proved me right, but he was flexible enough to know one single experiment can totally destroy what his whole worldview and his theories. And that's how I think we should be. We shouldn't be attached to our worldviews and our theories or our beliefs. We should be able to let go of them if evidence comes along which proves opposite. So if we get detached from social pressures and groupthink and public perception, we can think for ourselves. If you can abandon your fundamental core beliefs, it's very difficult. This is true freedom. So evidence should determine your worldview and philosophy. Your philosophy shouldn't determine your view of the world. Another danger is when you do make these changes is you would, oh, how did I believe that? I got lied to, that was an irrational belief, and you replace it with another irrational belief. So the same critical thinking you apply to something, you've got to maintain it and exercise that every day. Carl Sagan said, do we know who Carl Sagan was? He was a TV scientist who was very popular. Young people wouldn't remember him. But he was a real scientist. He said, finding the occasional straw of truth awash in a great ocean of confusion and bamboozle requires intelligence, vigilance, dedication and courage. But if we don't practice these tough habits of thought, we can't hope to resolve the truly serious problems that face us, and we risk becoming a nation of suckers, up for grabs by the next charlatan who comes along. So this is something you must practice every day to never be vulnerable, because we don't know where the next attack is coming from. So, we're getting near the end, guys. Thank you for putting up with this. My 2062 theory is a solar reset cosmology. It explains everything about how the world operates. It's a cycle of birth and death, which is clockwork. Now, if this is true, this is a mechanistic view of the world. It means it's predetermined and fatalistic. There's nothing we can do about these dates. So, is this describing the fate of the world? Is this God's purpose? What does it all mean? Does this conflict? Do we have free will? What is free will? What is God? Why were we created? Is this random chaos or predetermined? I'm just posing these as questions. I've got the answer on a cosmological level. I don't know whether this must necessarily translate to individual humans. So it goes to, what is life's purpose? Were we all destined to be in this room right now? We're always going to be here? Do we have free will to come here? Of course, everyone made a decision to come here, but were you always destined to be here? These are the sorts of fun questions I think this philosophy brings up. Now for your questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tone. Excellent. Guys, give him another big hand. That was wonderful. Big hand. Awesome.
Hey, guys, wonderful. No, that was excellent. I really liked it. Okay, we're going to get into the questions, the Q&A now.
Okay, can you hear me? There's this kind of combination of electric universe theory in there and a whole load of other stuff, yeah? But 12,000 years ago was the Geminga supernova, and all the work by Firestone and West in North America proved that. It's nothing to do with solar flares. It might have been solar flares, but that was all the Geminga supernova, and there's a massive amount of evidence for it all over the Northern Hemisphere. And 45,000 years ago before that, you had the gamma ray burst over Australia, which was from the same event, and that's a proven event. And that's there's a hell of a lot of evidence. You've got mammoths with meteorite strikes all in their different side. In one side found. You've got all of the Carolina Bay stuff going on, and a whole load of stuff. So I'm not saying that there isn't a sun cycle, and you can look at a whole bunch of people who do work on cycles like Ray Toombs and stuff like that. But the sun cycle is part of a bigger cycle, because we're in a if you like, a galactic cycle, and really the 12,000 years ago hit was completely to do with the Geminga supernova. And absolutely proven, and all you need to do is go and read the Firestone and West books and all the research, all the research and all the evidence in South America from that. So it's all to do with meteor strikes coming from there. And there's a kind of Velikovskian kind of hit in there with the, if you like, the psychotic state of humanity. So I'm not saying everything is wrong. And I'm not saying, and I don't have all the answers, but I'm saying there's a lot of other evidence that needs to be taken into account. There are, solar storms definitely affect humanity. They definitely affect consciousness. You can look at, there's a whole bunch of people who look at the way markets move when there's solar activity and stuff. but the 12,000 year event is definitely Jaminga supernova and stuff like that. So I think you've got to take that kind of stuff in. Yeah, well, my point is that there's a lot of kind of mixed up stuff in here, and whilst I think some of it's correct, I think it's not particularly all put together coherently, and there's a lot more evidence. I'm agreeing with you on some things, but I'm saying that there's other stuff as well, and we focusing. Yeah, my point is that there's a lot of stuff here, and the question is, do you know about the Jaminga supernova evidence, Firestone and West? Do you know all of that evidence? Okay, because that's absolutely really important and ties in with the whole Atlantic thing and the pyramids and a load of Chris Dunn's work. And all that.
All right, let me take. So a supernova event is a star event. The sun is a star. And you also said it was an asteroid event. So the alternative theory of the Younger Dryas event, which is now getting popularized, is that it was an asteroid event. So under my theory, asteroids don't exist. We saw how they measure the size of asteroids according to NASA. So if you want to follow conventional science, feel free to. This is a unique theory which is not conventional science. They're my theories. So my theory is that there's a 12,000 year, there are definite the only evidence we have is that the Earth was superheated. Some people say this is asteroids. I'm saying it's solar. The Giza Plateau, all the megaliths have got scorch marks on them from 12,000, likely from 12,000 years ago, from scorching from a solar plasma event. So there is lots of evidence of that, and there's lots of evidence of superheating. You want to believe in asteroids, go right ahead. Or a supernova is a star event. I don't believe in those stars. I believe we have a sun. So yeah, these are different philosophies. If you want to, I'm not misrepresenting the evidence. There is a no.
You're misrepresenting the evidence. Okay, and so I'm saying I don't disagree with some of the things you're saying, but we have to go on the evidence. And to say it was an asteroid event is misrepresenting the evidence. It was not an asteroid event.
I'm not saying it was an asteroid event. I'm saying that the Younger Dryas impact philosophy is that it was a Younger Dryas event, an asteroid event. I don't believe it was, right? I'm saying what they believe it was. I believe it was a solar event. Mainstream science says there was no Younger Dryas impact. Nothing happened 12,000 years ago is what mainstream science says, right? Look it up. And a supernova is what happens to a star when it reaches end of life and it explodes. So you can believe a distant star exploded and impacted Earth. I don't have a problem with that. The evidence we have is that the Earth was superheated. You can believe it was a micronova. Some people say it was an asteroid. I believe it was the sun.
Thank you. Okay, we got Eli next.
Andy, we can go into more detail later in the socializing part, okay guys? Yeah.
Thank you, Tones. I always appreciate another perspective, regardless, because it's just that this whole science thing, for anybody who knows me and my work, that it can't always be proven and there's always a delay. And the fact that you have a perception, okay, that you're testing and just conceptualizing from another angle, I appreciate that. And my main question that I would have for you, because I can't follow all of this science as much as some of you do, because like Einstein said, it just takes one thing to throw everything out, and it's all out the water. So the biggest thing as humans that we have to do is listen to our intuition and our own intention and our own intelligence. So my question for you, dear, is what do you believe, like this whole reset of what you think is going to happen, of what's being theorized by many people, is going to reset everything. But the thing is that when everything gets reset, there's always there's something to be gained for intelligence. And what do you believe, just in your own personal, I'm curious to understand, what is it that you believe that this is happening for us to evolve through?
Today.
No, the whole, like, why we're going through this whole solar system thing, this whole solar flare thing, and why there's this reset, because on other angles of the metaphysical world, yes, there's a reset happening in this world. But whether you perceive it from the scientific level or you see it from like...
I'm saying
I'm just asking what you...
Okay, I'm saying the reset will happen. It has not got nothing to do with humans, but part of that reset is the decrease in the geomagnetic field. So it's going to affect. This is what's one of the many things that's affecting humans in the last 60 years before the reset, right? So I think the reset is causing what's happening now, indirectly. The reset will happen regardless of whether there are humans or not. This is just what the world will do. We are affected by the geomagnetic field. The reset is causing this to happen. So we're just victims of the universe around us, or the world around us. I don't think there is a universe. Thank you. A good question.
Okay, thank you, Andy, for the first question, Alia for the second question, and here's Tom with the third question.
Hi, Tones. Thank you. That was a really interesting talk. Thank you. In particular, I had lots of questions going through, but one in particular was on the slide where you gave us a list of hoaxes, for example. The hypersonic missiles, quantum computers, they're in yellow. Then CERN...
They're uniquely mine.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
They're uniquely my analysis, that they're hoaxes. The rest I have taken from other people.
Okay, I'm trying to just grasp. You believe all of these are hoaxes, and it's not that you're singling out any that you'd highlighted in yellow, which were?
The ones in yellow are the ones which I have uniquely called a hoax. I don't believe anyone else has. All these other hoaxes, I believe, I have derived from other people. Other people have, they're not my original thoughts, okay? So many people believe the Earth is flat. I'm not the first person. That ICBMs don't exist, right? That satellites are not in space, right? So I'm not going to claim authorship of those ideas, but I'm going to list them. But I don't think anyone has made the observation that hypersonic missiles are just a press release. And
okay, well, so here's my question. The two areas that you've identified yourself, hypersonic missiles and quantum computers.
Right.
Have you taken a patent out on those? Okay. Sorry, that was you'd already answered my question. That was a little bit in jest. Thank you, Tones. That was great.
You think they exist and people taking patents out, therefore... it's not that they don't exist. If you think quantum computers are actually splitting electrons simultaneously, and this is transmitting data at such a fast speed, it's patently ridiculous. These are just supercooled computers operating very fast. That's all that's going on with quantum computing. They're not doing anything quantum.
Okay, thank you, Tom. We have Craig with the next question.
Thank you. Oh, got to hand it like this, do I?
Thank you for your talk. Wonderful. Thanks for Pat for allowing this platform. Early on you talked about it was all about delusion.
Well,
I've got
obviously,
two questions. All about delusion.
Right? So,
and do you have any?
I believe there is a
what
truth.
What are your thoughts about
right?
truth?
So many people, there is no truth. Everyone
do you
has
have
their own truth.
thoughts about
this
truth?
is the modern philosophy is I have my own truth, you have, no, I believe there is a truth, an provable truth, and if you're not in truth, you're in delusion. Everyone thinks they're right. Everyone thinks they're a critical thinker. Everyone thinks they know are right. But I'm saying, well, no, there is only one truth. Everyone else is being delusional.
And my second question is about, my focus is about, if you can connect with the energy and see good in everything you... And my second question is about, my focus is about, if you can connect with the energy and see good in everything you live and breathe, and surround yourself with good people here, and do the things that you can change that add value to your life. Focus that energy, that life force that you have, on things that you can change, not things you can't. And focus on community and growth and the way forward, and that's my truth.
Thank you, Greg.
Absolutely, but you can do that and be a good person and still be delusional, right? I didn't say that. I said the Earth is flat. So it's only ever been measured flat. If anybody can measure curvature, I'll give you $100,000, or show me somebody who has. I'll show you. There are slides coming up here showing you how all the photos of the globe have been photoshopped, and it'll give you a model of what is happening on and at the edge of the Earth is Antarctica. It surrounds the Earth, so you never get to the end and you can never fall off. You will never get that far, whether it's an ice wall or geomagnetic or whatever it is. No one has ever gone through there. So I don't know what's beyond. I can't answer that. But the fact that you think you've seen that picture of the water falling off a disc on Earth, and how stupid are those people, is propaganda, which you have fallen for, which is deliberate.
Very quick one, in terms of us asking the question. Can you tell us some more about the Carrington Event?
1859, it was just coincidental that an astronomer happened to see some major sun flares and big solar ejections, and that a couple of days later, and that was Carrington, and a couple of days later, not only were these giant auroras seen, but the telegraphs would either blow up, they'd turn them off, that they could operate without electricity. It damaged all the electrical equipment, created turbulent seas. It was a major event. And that was at a time when the world had very little electrical equipment. Literally the only electrical equipment was the telegraph. So auroras were so people could see at night. The auroras were so bright you could see at night time. It was like daytime. It was so bright. So this is a major electrical event, which mainstream science says that we're due for on any scale, right? Now, the most important thing in my talk now is one of those is due, and is not only more likely to happen now. Forget about the 2062 reset. The Carrington event is more likely to happen now, which a much smaller solar flare. The auroras that happened in May for such a small solar flare is astounding. So I'm just looking at the fact that is regardless of a 2062 reset. I'm just explaining why the geomagnetic field is decreasing, but for no other reason. Just from what's happening now is a warning that we're going to be hit in the next, within the next 15 years, right? One way or another. And nothing to do with me, right? It'll happen, and you won't be warned about it.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks. Next group. Oh, can I just add to that? So, by the way, everybody, Carrington is Carrington, named after the British astronomer Richard Carrington. It was also independently discovered by Richard Hodgson on September 1st of 1859. So it dissipated on September 2nd. So as Tones just said, if that happened right now today, it would cause supposedly trillions of dollars worth of damage in the United States alone. It was a massive event, and it's the first ever recorded geomagnetic storm or geomagnetic event. Yeah, Carrington with a C. Okay, Ruben.
Yes. 2,000 years ago, about the mathematician Eratosthenes was next to a well, and the sun's rays fell directly in the well at noon. And about 800 kilometers away, there was another well, and the sun's rays didn't go directly within the well. So how come this would be compatible with the flat Earth theory?
Excellent question, and I was going to do a talk on this before I changed my mind. It's talking about, if people didn't hear Aristophanes, so if you want to look up what NASA's #1 proof of a globe, and the Stephen Hawking did a documentary called Genius. And the first proof of a globe Earth is that we've known this for 2,000 years, which is meant to automatically fool you that this is settled science. Aristophanes was Greek, and I'm Greek, so he's a fellow countryman. The first fraud of Aristophanes that him and his compatriot, I think 200 or 300 miles away, 2,000 years ago, how do you measure exactly how far away you are from another person? And how do you both measure the sun's rays at exactly the same time? Did they have mobile phones back then? Did they have a big string with a can on it? Impossible. So you know the story itself is fabricated, okay? But let's just take them at their word that it did happen. This is how they deceive you. They say the sun's rays in two wells 300 miles apart, if you measure the difference, will demonstrate the curvature of the Earth. And from this you can calculate the curvature of the whole Earth. You go, oh my God, that's very impressive science. That's absolutely true. What they don't tell you, if this was so true, why would they lie to you? They lied to you about this. In a flat Earth, the sun is a lot closer. It's a few thousand miles away. So you get exactly the same calculations on a flat Earth with a close sun as you do on a globe with the sun 93 million miles away. So you have parallel mathematics going on here, but they deceive you, don't tell you that the maths work on a flat Earth as well. Their #1 proof is a lie. That the story is a lie, the mathematics is not a proof. To me, that's devastating to them. And what a coincidence that it's like the sun and the moon are exactly 400 times bigger and 400 times further apart. All these parallel mathematics you think is just coincidence or it's a fraud. And it's very hard to accept that it's a fraud because you don't want to accept you've been lied to. But if you're prepared to accept the truth, you'll just follow what the evidence tells you. Why can't, in modern day technology, why can't we measure the curvature of the Earth? Why did in that same Genius documentary, did Stephen Hawking try to put a laser beam to show that the ocean curves, and it's just, they're not even pointing a straight laser. I should demonstrate here, it's just a fraudulent documentary because you cannot prove curvature. Can I mention Justin, who's one of our members here, sent me a photo of the picture from the plane where you can see the camera underneath the plane, and for some reason they didn't turn it off. When he got to the airport, you could see there was a fisheye lens because the walkway was curved on the tarmac. Sorry, the white markings of a walkway were curved. So they're using a fisheye lens in a plane to convince you that, oh look, you can see curvature. You can see all these globe pictures. You can see on this slideshow that NASA admits they're photoshopped. All the photos of the globe, You're going to compare them all. They all show the continents in different sizes. And here's what I'm saying to you. I'm not going to convince anyone today it's a flat Earth, but if you are prepared to be open to that and just try to look to evidence of the globe, you'll become a flat earther. But I love that Aristotle's. Thank you for bringing that up, because it's the classic fraud.
Okay, guys. Okay, guys. I'm going to round it up here because this is such an riveting, interesting topic. We could go on forever. Absolutely. So we're going to continue the socializing part in the front, but I just want everybody to give Crone a massive, round, flat hand of applause. Round of applause. Thank you very much, Crone.
Thank you, Pat.
Excellent talk. Okay, thank you very much, guys. And